Hello and welcome to episode 8 of We All Float Down Here, a Stephen King podcast. I'm Oscar.
And I'm Simon.
And today we are going to be talking about Christine.
Christine is the 1983 novel by Stephen King about the possessed car. The name of the car is Christine. You know the image. You probably know the story if you're watching this. Maybe you've seen the John Carpenter film, which came out the same year as the book. Such was the demand by this point. There was this race, pardon the car pun, to get Stephen King books to screen. So, and big name directors, we've talked about this before with the previous episodes, but big name directors were lining up and horror legends were lining up.
They were pumping these movies out
completely,
like same year as Crazy.
And we'll talk to the film later. We'll talk about that. But as is often the way, I did see the film before I read the book. We'll get into that.
So basically, this book is from the perspective of a teenage boy called Dennis. And one day, him and his friend Arnie Cunningham are in town and they walk past a scrapyard and see this broken down 1958 Fury red car. And Arnie, his friend, falls in love with it and really wants to buy it and make it his car. And Dennis thinks this is a terrible idea, but Arnie buys it anyway, and it turns into a love triangle basically with him, his car, and his girlfriend. And turns out this car might be haunted.
The book was written in 1983, as we said, but it's set in the late 70s, which is an interesting move, just setting the book a few years, before the time he was writing it. And I think what King was trying to do there is tap into the nostalgia around the 50s that had been so big in the 70s. It was still happening in the early 80s. And some of this stuff is material you won't know as much about, Oscar, but the TV show Happy Days was made in the late 70s. That carried on. That was probably still just about to finish around the time that Christine came out, but that was set in the 50s. And the whole thing around the 70s nostalgia for the 50s, there was the band Sha Na Na, and there were spin-off shows from Happy Days. It was a kind of warm, nostalgic vibe to good times. Teenagers driving around in cars, easier times, happier times than the war in the 60s, the war in the 70s. The economy in America was doing better. There was this whole idea of American-made products like these big Cadillacs and Plymouths and these big cars with wings out the back. And so I think that's what King's tapping into. He obviously grew up through that era too, so it's nostalgia for him. And when you were talking about the love triangle, it's fair to say that Arnie is the quintessential high school nerd that's like in the movies, that's bullied, that's not cool. Like he's got his friend, but he's not cool. And the car is very much become not just an extension of his personality. The car gives him a personality.
Yeah, and it's also like a really cool dynamic how this absolute like nerd is friends with one of the popular kids. Who kind of like protects him and takes him under his wing. Again,
that's very Happy Days with the dynamic there with Richie Cunningham and the Fonz. And so he also becomes the power, I guess, the idea of power of I'm this cool guy with this cool car. It goes to his head. He starts dressing cool and thinking he's cool, and he starts snubbing people in his family and in his friendship group that he was, I guess lesser than or just on a level where he suddenly thinks he's above them. Yeah.
So how did you first discover Christine?
So I first discovered Christine through the movie. I was reading King books, loving King books, and I don't know why I didn't read Christine. I know I bought a copy of it and I just never got around to reading it, but I watched the movie. I loved the movie. I had seen a couple of John Carpenter films at the time. Obviously I've seen them all now and I love what he does. I also my big memory of the film the first time I watched it was the opening scene with the George Thorogood music, Bad to the Bone, which again is a bit of a 50s pastiche of a song. It's made in the 80s, but it's the whole George Thorogood band thing was they kind of looked like 50s greasers that were doing that kind of American classic garage rock. So I just really got into it. I probably watched it in the very early 90s. Like I say, I owned Christine for a long time. Then I got rid of it without ever reading it. Only read it for the first time a couple of years ago.
Yeah, you and me actually read this at the same
Yeah,
time
yeah.
on like New Year's Eve type of thing,
Yeah,
2023.
But I stalled on it. You blitzed through it.
I blitzed through it in 2 days.
And what is it, about a 700-page book?
Yeah, I was reading non-stop.
Yeah.
But the thing is, even though we read it at the same time, I hadn't watched the movie at this point. I'd read the book first.
Yeah, and it had been years since I'd seen the film, so I guess it was fresh in my mind, having watched it a couple of times. So when I finally got to reading it, I had a little bit of an idea, obviously, of what's going to happen, but the book felt brand new to me, and I was like, as another example where I was like, I couldn't believe I hadn't read it earlier. But I know I've said on this podcast before with things like The Dead Zone and even Salem's Lot, which I really enjoyed. Oh, I wish I'd read this earlier. Actually, with Christine, it didn't matter. I just loved finally getting to read it. Yeah,
and I started this book on, I think, New Year's Eve and finished it on New Year's Day. So
you read this just cool. Non-stop.
I remember when I was a lot younger, I heard of the movie of Christine. You were talking to me about it and wondered if I wanted to watch it. And you told me it was about a horror movie about a killer car. And I was like, that sounds lame. That sounds corny.
Yeah.
But then I fell in love with Stephen King's books like a year later. And, I just decided, I'd read this. And also, because I didn't know what else to read by Stephen King. And also, it was basically the longest, it was the first really long Stephen King book I read. And I think this is definitely the longest one we've talked about yet. Oh, wait, no, Stand.
Yeah, apart from The Stand, this
is the longest.
Yeah, it's not considered one of his epics.
Yeah.
Like The Stand and It and Under the Dome. It's not one of the big epics, but it is a big, big book.
And the thing is, it flies by.
Mostly.
We should get into our review. I just want to say one of my positives is that it flies by. It doesn't feel like 700 pages.
Mostly.
I do think it could have been a bit shorter,
exactly.
Maybe 100 pages.
So we're missing a crucial element here, though. Christine is I referenced it at the very top, but Christine is a haunted or possessed car. And Christine becomes almost like an actual entity. Yeah. And she is there to protect Arnie, basically, at the risk and expense of other people. And the book, I think the reputation of the book is pretty solid, but I also think a few people over the years have, maybe this is one of the first ones where in Stephen King lore people started to go, oh, this is just getting a bit silly. You've got a haunted car, what's next? A haunted school bag, what's next? A haunted letterbox where you put your, people started talking about that and it became ripe for parody. But I reckon the book has mostly aged really, really well.
It is really fun.
Yeah,
and just fun. Enjoyable and happy.
And one of the things about your point about it mostly flies by is, yes, all of that great Stephen King backstory of characters, motivations, what they're like, their internal monologues, but a lot of family drama.
Yeah.
Just when you're reading it, you feel like you're watching a scripted TV show, in the pages of this, and it's amazing writing.
I really like the trope that Stephen King most notably does in Shawshank Redemption, where it's and lots of other people do it, but in Stephen King, I feel like he might be the genius of it, where the book is set from the perspective of someone who's talking about someone else.
Yeah, they're sharing someone else's story.
And I really like it. And the thing that's really cool though is that even though this is 100% Arnie Cunningham's story, you also have that appreciation for Dennis.
Yeah.
And you really
the
enjoy
secondary
his character
is the narrator, not the lead character. Yeah,
and you really you don't hear too much about his backstory, but he drops kind of subtle hints about it, and you're like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, and you genuinely care even though it's not his story.
Yeah.
He was only a witness of it.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, he destroys the car in the end, but this isn't his story. Just like how in Shawshank Redemption it's Red talking about Andy. Yeah. And I love that trope. And even though I love Dennis, as I was saying, Arnie Cunningham is one of my favourite Stephen King characters of all time. It's just amazing. And one of my wild Stephen King hot takes is that I enjoy the arc of Arnie Cunningham turning into a psychopath as much, if not more, than the arc of Jack Torrance
Wow,
turning into
yeah,
a psychopath
interesting.
from The Shining.
Interesting.
So yeah, this car kind of drives Arnie Cunningham mad.
Yeah.
Like, he goes insane, he goes
Yeah.
bonkers. And it's kind of funny in a way, like
And
it's
it
sort of
freezes-
comical.
It's comical. It freezes out the girlfriend, Like it locks her in the car at one point and like kind of suffocates her basically.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
That's a really great scene.
Yeah,
They get like
yeah.
a hamburger from McDonald's, and they go into like a drive car park movie, also kind of that
Drive-through, yeah.
50s
Yep,
nostalgia.
Yep.
I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And she starts eating the hamburger, and he goes outside, and then the car doors lock from the inside, and he can't get in, but she's sitting there choking on the hamburger, and then it's only this random stranger that saves her.
That's
and
right,
then
yeah.
That's kind of what turns his girlfriend
Against
against
the
the
car.
car and
Yeah.
almost kind of him as well.
That's right. The idea of the car and how it's basically poisoning him against her because it's created this hyper extended personality.
And also, Arnie Cunningham starts dating like one of the most popular girls in school, and I do like that trope, as I was saying, like how he has one of the most popular friends and one of the most popular girlfriends in the school,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
like that trope. And yeah,
Yes, it's a classic. The nerd made good or made cool, but then he goes from being made good and cool to kind of being made evil.
yeah.
Yeah, like that. It's so there's this theme there
It's
around
got hints of Carrie.
totally, and there's this theme there around like be your authentic self rather than the fake version.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff in the book. I mean, it's in the film, but in the book with these 700 pages, there are some really cool themes developed, and also a lot of music.
Yeah.
A lot of
Every
references.
single chapter
Yeah.
has like a quote from a song.
Yeah, like the
It'll be like the Bob Dylan, Beatles, the Beach Boys type stuff. like that.
yeah. Like so the money they were paying out for permissions would have been enormous, but obviously King was by this point an incredibly bankable author with the film adaptations rolling in and the books flying off the shelves. But yeah, it's insane how many music quotes there are, and then references to music within the text as well, but those standalone quotes at the top of each chapter. So yeah, really works hard to bake in this retro vibe, and it really lives in there. It's it's so baked through the whole thing.
Yeah, and the thing is that even though it's really nostalgic to a time that was old, even when this book was first released, it still ages really well.
Yeah. It still makes sense.
We forgot to go over editions, so I just want to quickly mention them. Randomly, I have this kind of like just random paperback that's fine. I have 3 copies, which might be the most I've had so far to show. I haven't read this one. It's fine. I don't mind it. It was the first copy I got. This one, it's one of the Rainbow collectibles that I keep showing, a hardback, so it's an ultra collectible, but it looks terrible.
Yeah, the front cover is
It's
really
disgusting.
bad.
It's disgusting. And it's annoying.
It's cool for you to have it for the collection, but on its own.
These are probably the most beautiful books I own, and I love this collection so much, and I will always buy them if I see them in the store, no matter what. But, like, they could have done so much better. Also, like, they could have made the car red. They could have made the background white, not this, like, yellow. And, yeah, it's just bad. And then I'd have this one that I really do like, which is a Rainbow re-edition. That's really nice. And it's the one I've read twice. Because I reread this for the podcast as well. So I've read this twice with this copy.
So twice within the span of about a couple of years,
Yep.
So I've got this one here, this hardback, which I like. I love the image because
Yeah, that's quite cool.
I wonder if this is a movie tie-in, like, because the image is so similar to some of the images.
It's kind of like one of those ones that kind of have that vibe,
Yeah.
but it isn't quite.
And then
I love this
like
copy.
this one, which I just bought this off Trade Me. I haven't read this. I read this edition. And then this is the first of my ultra stupid obsession, where I have a copy of Christine. I mean, it just looks like another copy of Christine, but this is a German language edition, and I cannot speak German. I have not a whole lot of Stephen King foreign language editions, but I have a few. You'll see a
You
few.
have way too many.
I have too many for someone who can't speak the languages that they're in. But I've got a
I mean,
Dutch
it's a
one.
cool-
I've got a
it's-
few German, and I've got a couple of French ones.
I
And
mean, it's a cool cover.
it's
so.
a cool cover. I'm not spending loads and loads of money on them, so it's not like I'm going around going, I've got to have that $50 book that I'll never read.
Yeah.
But I think, I like the cover, and it's like they go well together, and they've all got the car motif. So those are my 3 editions of the book. This is the one I read. I really enjoyed reading the book, but I've hinted at this a couple of times. Well, I keep saying mostly. It does dip a little bit in the middle. Now it does the perspective shift too. It goes from,
we should talk about that. So like the first part is, I'm trying to think if this is the first novel that we've talked about where Stephen King does first person.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna double down on that because I could be wrong, but I'm 95% sure that he doesn't do first person in any book apart from this up until this point.
Yeah.
For part 1, it's from Dennis's perspective, but then for part 2, it shifts into Arnie Cunningham's third person perspective, and then the last part goes back to Dennis's first person perspective.
Yeah.
It's really weird, but somehow it works. Like, it doesn't really matter.
I think it's just that thing. Like for me, I just think King was so popular by this point that I don't think an editor was going to stand up to him and go, hey Steve, you need to prune this by 200 pages or 100 pages.
I think it works. It
It
adds a little
does.
bit of quirkiness to it.
It does, but
in a good way.
I think there's no way you would read this in today. Well, we both have read it recently. There's no way you'd read this in today's climate and go, that deserves all 700 of its pages.
Yeah, probably
Come on.
not.
So I reckon, if it was written today, it would have 100 to 200 pages right out of the middle pulled out of it.
No, the middle's the best part.
Yeah, but it's long.
It's the last like 200 pages that could have had like 100 pages trimmed off it.
Okay.
That part where Arnie Cunningham's getting like kind of, that like, because Christine, this part's really good. Christine, gets possessed and takes over itself and runs over a bunch of bullies that bullied Arnie, and runs them over. And, so people are thinking Arnie did that, and he's getting, pressed by the cops about it, and, trying to get lawyers and stuff. And it just goes on for too long, even though it's a cool concept. It goes on, it drags that.
Yeah.
I feel like that is where it could have been like edited and condensed down.
Maybe that's King doing his thing, which he's since got into more, like the whole, like he loves, because this happens a bit in the Dead Zone. He loves the whole detective thing.
I don't think it really works for
No,
the story that
No,
way.
no, but he's gone on to actually do crime novels, a few, and short stories, loads of stories with this like true crime, not true crime, this fictional detective stuff, like noir and that sort of thing. And I wonder if it's him just trying to feed a bit of that into this. But what it does do well is, you said it's pretty comical, which it is, but it also treats this totally comical scenario just seriously enough. And so there's actually...
it's not a comedy.
You're not going, this is absolute farce. You're actually suspending your disbelief enough to go, I want to see what happens. It's quite tense.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's quite tense, and as you said, it really mostly just rips along and you're riveted. You're like...
I personally do believe the second, like the middle portion, part 2, is my favourite part of the book.
Yeah.
Do you disagree?
I liked it, but I think it starts really well as well. I think you can't deny that it kicks off.
In my opinion, the Arnie Cunningham section has all the best parts. It's got that hamburger thing.
Yeah.
And it also has by far my favourite scene. I'm not sure if you'll agree with this. By far my favourite scene in the movie is when... So earlier in the book, Arnie gets these kids kicked out of school for like threatening him with a knife.
Yeah.
So they go into this public car park where he's holding Christine, and they like absolutely smash it to bits.
Baseball
and they even
bat the car,
baseball bat the car,
Yeah.
rip the engine out,
Yeah.
and they even take a crap on the windscreen,
Yeah.
and they just absolutely destroy it.
Yeah.
And then Arnie finds it, and he just has a meltdown in front of his girlfriend, and that's like when she leaves.
Yeah.
And then in the movie, Christine rebuilds itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Or herself,
Yeah.
as they would say.
Yeah.
Does that happen in the book? I literally can't remember.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
I can't.
sure it
I
does.
think it does.
I'm pretty sure it does.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
why I forgot. I literally read it recently.
Yeah.
That's by far my favorite scene in the book, The start's also really good. It
Yeah.
just jumps
Yeah.
right into it. I
Yeah.
want to do one of those things where I read the first line.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a prologue first, but like the opening line of the first chapter, part 1. Listen to how, just straight into it this is. "Oh my god," my friend Arnie Cunningham cried out suddenly. "What is it?" I asked. It just gets you straight into it. It's just like Firestarter. I feel like he was trying to be very fast paced and not mess around. Even though there is that, Stephen King bloat in the middle and end.
Yeah.
Even though I do think that's
Well, we're still in the, we won't go into it heaps because it's part of all of the discussion of these books. It's so well known, but it is part of the alleged drinking too much, taking drugs era before the intervention started. So he was pumping out the material and getting his flow on, getting his groove on, which probably accounts for the 700 pages, and maybe some belligerence from him around, no, these pages are staying. No, this is the book I wrote. This is what I want, because he would have had the clout by then, well and truly to say, So should we jump into the film for a bit?
Yeah. So what are we gonna rate Christine?
Oh yeah.
I just want to say first that when I first read this book, as you can probably tell by the fact that I read it in 2 days, so that's 350 pages at least, because it's like 750 a day, which is wild. I loved it the first time I read it. It was amazing, and I think the first time I read it, it was like my second favorite Stephen King book or something, and I'd give it a 10. So I was hoping to reread it and love it even more or as much, or be able to come on here and be like, this is my first 10. But sadly, I kind of realised that dip in the last quarter, that could have just shaved off 100 pages. And sadly, even though I still absolutely loved it, I'm going to have to give it a 9 out of 10, which is an amazing score. I love this book.
Yeah.
But I was expecting a 10, a perfect rating, because of how fun it is. Personally, I think it's a 9. It's on that same level of like Shining, Salem's Lot, Firestarter type of thing.
Nice. Yeah, I guess I would, give it an 8. I would give I don't think, because I just read it over a few weeks, and I haven't gone back to it. I read it 2 years ago, and I'd seen the film a bunch of times, and the build up and the lead up to that, and then not for ages. I really loved it. I'm so glad I read this book, and I have none of the regret of not reading it sooner. I just enjoyed it, and I think overall it's aged really well. We're purposely not really talking about the weird stuff in this book. There is this sort of weird, having sex with a car kind of thing, which is an over-the-top metaphor in its extreme. It's so stupid.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That probably, is the thing that's I don't want to say dates it, but it's definitely the most cringy thing about it, and the thing you would not really get away with today.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm giving it
It's
an
like
8.
almost on the level, no, not nearly, but it's almost kind of as shocking in a way, same ballpark as that one scene from It.
Yeah, that's it. Like all of the talk about that in the King communities, and it feels like not as much about the Christine scene or scenes.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So the movie,
1983, John Carpenter.
Yeah, so this is Carpenter is similar to King in, age-wise, same generation, and so grew up with a lot of the same kinds of influences, those sci-fi stories on the radio and sci-fi magazines and horror stuff. And so I can see him being like into the nostalgia of this. Look, it isn't one of Carpenter's all-time great films.
I mean,
but I love it as a film. I think it's a really strong adaptation.
Here's the thing. I think already I've watched Halloween, and I think John Carpenter's an amazing horror director. Somehow I haven't watched The Thing, which is crazy. I have to watch that.
Yeah.
I don't know why. There's no reason I haven't watched it. I have heard great things, and I'm sure it's amazing. But yeah.
Yeah, this followed a huge run from him of these great, like he sets up Halloween, like he makes the first one. he makes the score and scripts the second one. He walks away completely for the third one, but still contributes the score. So his music is all through his films.
Yeah.
Then he jumps into like a couple of great, like kind of, well, The Thing is amazing, and The Fog is a really, really cool ghost story before that. So he's on a great run, and then there's
maybe we should do a binge of this.
Oh, that's so good.
Not discography.
It's filmography. Yeah, because. And then you've got like Escape from New York, which is a lot of fun, and that's him starting to move towards the sci-fi action thing. And Christine's sort of a bit of a weird anomaly in a way for him, but I get why he signed up for it. I get why he did it, or why he was signed up for it.
I understand why the die-hard John Carpenter fans wouldn't rate it high in their lists, but I personally love it, and I think it's a really, really good adaptation.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I don't think it really could have gone better.
And it doesn't ruin the book. It complements the book. Like, it's pretty faithful. Very faithful.
It really doubles down on the funness, the teenage drama, and it also
and it doesn't go full cringe on the thing we just talked about. Like it obviously shows you visually that Arnie is being changed by this car, and like you said, you set up nicely the love triangle kind of element, but it doesn't go creeps full. It won't disappoint anyone who's finally going to watch it because they've read the book. And in my case, and there must be people like this, it didn't ruin the book for me at all. It just set up a nice reading experience.
I first watched this movie like a little bit after I read the book.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great adaptation. The car driving itself, and the actual action of that, it killing people, it looks really cool.
Yeah, it's a 40-year-old film now, and it still looks really cool, I reckon. So visually it's beautiful, I think, especially towards the end, car driving along in flames, that sort of stuff is really cool. Obviously the stunt driver being, with the screen being blacked out, the way they set those things up looks very cool. Beautiful score as always, that complements it nicely. No one's a terrible actor in it. No one's hitting it out of the park and doing an amazing performance, but he's a faithful, solid...
I know, I think Arnie Cunningham's, whoever that actor is, his performance is great.
Oh, yeah. There's some good performances, but you know what I'm saying. Like, there's no, Jack Nicholson in The Shining. There's none of that.
Or whoever the mum's name is in Cujo.
Yeah. There's none of that sort of stuff. It's just solid. Harry Dean Stanton's cool to see in it, of course, as the kind of gumshoe detective guy. But
one thing I also want to mention is it's one of those peak examples of just everybody in this high school looking like they're 25 years old.
Yeah. And also shades big time of Carrie as well, right? In those high school scenes, like very similar to the movie Carrie in its look and feel, because it's essentially set in the same time as that film, where the action's set. Like in the late 70s.
Yeah, true.
Good movie. I've watched it too many times now to absolutely love it. So having watched it a couple of times in the last couple of years and having seen it, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 times before that.
Wow.
I'm going to give it a solid 7. It's a fun film. It's not bad at all, but I can't love it because, it's second tier Carpenter as well. I've got to include that because he's such a name director. You can't just go... But like we said at the top of the film discussion, really strong adaptation.
Yeah, it really is, and I'd be very keen to go on that John Carpenter binge.
Yeah.
I'm personally probably going to give it a higher rating than you because I feel like
it's newer to you. Yeah,
it's newer to me, and it does a really, really good job at adapting the book that I love. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. So,
nice.
You gave the book an 8, and in the movie the 7. I'm giving the book a 9, and in the movie the 8. So that's consistent.
Yeah.
So next episode we have Pet Sematary, which is exciting.
That is exciting.
It's a very talked about book.
I mean, I'll remind you when we talk about it, but I'll say now it's the very first Stephen King book I ever read.
Yeah, it was my second.
Yeah, and then obviously there's a bit of other King stuff happening around this time that. We'll pick up, and plenty of action, but there's the comic book series, there's short stories always happening, more and more film adaptations, and he's just becoming massive in the culture. You know, he's just becoming the big name in horror novelists. But Pet Sematary is going to be an interesting one to talk about.
Yeah, that will be. Yeah, because I have good memories of that one. It was like my second Stephen King book. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it was definitely my first film book, and I think it was also my first movie because I watched the film straight after.
True.
So as we tended to do as we were discovering these books, so and as people still do, really, don't they? You know, you read the book and you hear there's an adaptation, you want to see it. So Pet Sematary next time, and you know, Christine, if you've never read it, if you've never watched it, solid recommendations from us.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you very soon for Pet Sematary.